Shao-chun, who graduated her master's in 2022 from the Graduate Institute of Art History at National Taiwan University. There she studied sinology, art history, and archaeology of early China. So please note that there is a trigger warning for this talk because there will be images of skulls and other bones of both humans and more than human animals. So welcome, and I will hand over to you to share your screen.
Humans don't need to exploit and consume animals for survival, yet we continue to do so due to the significance they attach to this practice. The formation of this ideology is complicated. Studying the history and archaeology of early China allowed me to explore these questions. The Shang Dynasty developed delicate bronze casting technology. However, it was also the golden age of Chinese bone craft. Shang people highly value bone artifacts, especially the ruling elite. But why did they choose bone? It's crucial to recognize that the material's worth is constructed by culture, not just the reflection of technological advancement. In the Shang belief system, animals' lives, bodies, and bones carried profound meanings. Here is the outline of my presentation. First, I will briefly introduce the background of the Shang bone artifacts, including the history of the Shang Dynasty and the excavation. Then I will talk about the distribution of bone artifacts in Anyang tombs. In the third segment, I will employ the archaeological report and oracle bone script to explore the potential explanations for the phenomenon I observed. Shang is the first historically confirmed dynasty in China, dated from 1250 to 1046 BC. A record that proved the existence of this kingdom are oracle bones, which were the pieces of ox spatula and turtle shells, which were used for king's divination and only excavated from the palace. Intentionally, in the early 20th century, the purpose of excavating Anyang was to find oracle bones. However, ultimately, archaeologists discovered the largest metropolis of early China, the capital city of the late Shang dynasty. Anyang, or you can say Inshu, in other words, in Henan province. During the excavation spanning from 1928 to 1937, the archaeologists of Academia Sinica unearthed 11 kings' tombs and the palace complex. The progress of the excavation was interrupted by the Second World War and the subsequent civil war with the Communist Party. In 1949, the government of the Republic of China migrated to Taiwan. Now those royal artifacts are stored in Academia Sinica, Taipei, and welcome to our museum. Now Chinese Academy of Social Sciences of PRC continued the excavation of Anyang. Today, the city covers an area of 30 square kilometers with more than 10,000 tombs and numerous facilities revealed. With archaeological data accumulated over almost 100 years, we are able to analyze the distribution pattern of the bone artifacts in the tombs. After scanning all the tombs in Anyang, there are about 200 tombs with bone artifacts. I found that a large number of bone artifacts are concentrated in the king's tombs, Xibeigang Royal Cemetery. Although all the king's tombs are greatly destroyed and robbed, the number, variety, and craftsmanship of bone artifacts are significant. For instance, tomb number 1001 has yielded over 10,000 fragments, including vessels, utensils, instrument, arrowhead, and numerous ornaments and tools. Many of these items showcase intricate carvings, some even featuring turquoise inlays. This large number of bone artifacts are the most prominent existing feature of the king's tombs. The tomb of Lady Fu Hao, who might have been the queen or consort, is one of the most well-preserved royal tombs in Anyang, unearthed 564 bone artifacts, including ivory vessels, hairpins, and animal-shaped ornaments. Although King's tomb have been severely damaged, we can see that there is a big gap between the Shang king and his queen burial bone artifacts. So indeed, bone artifacts shows the hierarchy system. The burial bone artifacts reveal one's identity in the Shang society. It's widely accepted that the social status of individuals in the Shang dynasty is defined by the size of the tomb and the number of bronze gu and jade vessels in the tomb. If a tomb owner has more gu and jade, then he or she would have more other burial objects, meaning that the social status of that person was higher. And of course, the tomb will be bigger. So usually, there are more bone artifacts in large or medium-sized burial, but sometimes you can see that a medium-sized tomb with only a few bone artifacts and a small tomb with numerous bone artifacts. So it is weird, right? But when I look at the oracle bone script, it all makes sense. The tomb owner with particularly rich bone artifacts can always be found in oracle bone document, indicating their close relationship with the kings, since the oracle bones are the records of the king's divination. There were members of the royal family, diviners, or military generals. The bone artifacts may be a special reward given by the kings to his cronies. So why did bone become the specific material that has strong connection with the Shang kings? It's because from animals to the eventual consumption, the king controlled every phase of the process. Let's begin with the bone workshop in Anyang. Currently, there are 3 bone workshops unearthed, neighboring the bronze casting workshops. Oracle bone script revealed that the Shang kings oversaw craftsmen such like they did the military, appointing specific nobles to manage the craftsman industry. Raw materials of making bone artifacts at Anyang came mostly from domesticated animals, especially cattle. Hairpins and arrowheads are the main products. Besides, there is a huge bone pit in the palace area, containing more than 330,000 pieces of cattle bones. This bone pit indicates that consumption of cattle may concentrated among the kings and royal family. The royals ate the meat and the bones were distributed to different bone workshops. In the late Shang dynasty, cattle were introduced in China from Middle East Asia in large numbers. The amount of cattle bones unearthed from the metropolis is significantly more than other settlements in the same period. Professor Kamura of Kyoto University suggests that the emphasis on cattle is the value system created by the Shang kings, and also constructed the hierarchy system and economic structure of the late Shang dynasty. According to the oracle bone document, animal farming are controlled by the ruling class. There was a position for nobles called Mu, who was in charge of cattle and sheep farming. The range were located in the frontier of kingdom, neighboring the land of nomads. One could operate with soldiers, guarding the border while defending the livestock. Besides cattle and sheep, Mu also offered slaves and turtle shells to the king. And the slaves would eventually become human sacrifices in royal cemetery. The ruling class controlled animal farming, which also reflect on their diet. Carbon isotope analysis of unknown residence bones reveal severe dietary contrast based on social status. The ruling class consumed abundant meat, while ordinary civilians followed largely vegetarian diets. The majority of bone artifacts were made from cattle bones. However, some special bone artifacts were made from wild animals, such as elephant, tigers, deer, and buffalo. These artifacts were only used by kings and royal families. In this era, hunting was no longer for survival or economy, but a potential activity limited to the ruling elite. The wild animal bones unearthed in Anyang, from sacrifices to bone artifacts, have quite strong political implications. The skeleton of wild animals largely concentrated in the palace area, including bears, rhinos, foxes, wolves, boars, eagles, cranes, owls, and even whales. It can also be seen from the archibone inscription that the Shang king attached great importance to hunting, especially King Wuding. His archibones accounted for half of the existing archibones, and 1/4 of them were about hunting. Why did kings attach great importance to hunting? Because it is not merely a blood entertainment, but a ruling strategy. The king patrolled and hunted in different states, demonstrating his military power. The bones of the prey in royal hunting were carved with a record of this event. For example, this inscription on this beautifully carved bone spatula recorded the time, location, and the prey in this royal hunting. The king then gave this bone to his intimate officer. Hunting was also related to war. On the skull of the deer, the inscriptions say that the king conquered Renfang, which might be a foreign state to the Shang kingdom. Together unearthed with this deer skull were the shoulder blade of a whale and buffalo and the jaw of an elephant. It seems like only giant beast could demonstrate the power of the king. To sum up, there we can see that a significant concentration of bone artifact in the royal tomb can be seen as one of the best existing evidence of the Shang king's control over lives and resources, which may represent the centralization of political power in the late Shang dynasty. Behind this phenomenon is the new form of conquest over nature and animals. The introduction of cattle and the meaning shift of hunting gave the bone of animals a totally different meaning apart from the Neolithic period. And the bone had become the symbol of royal power. Animals are everywhere in Chinese history and archaeology. This research is just a tiny puzzle to decipher the meaning of animals in the Shang dynasty. There are a lot of work to do in the future. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
That was wonderful. Thank you. That was really, really rich. So we have some questions coming into the Padlet for you already. There's a few people here also giving you a nice little virtual applause. So do head over to the Padlet and take a look at those questions, and we will come back to the questions at the end once we have seen the other two presentations. So thank you so much. It's it's a real pleasure to see how animal studies intersects with different disciplines. So thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, so our next talk today is with Madelena Mañetto, who is a PhD candidate at the Victoria University of Wellington, where she also teaches on courses including design, ethnography, and speculative design. So Madelena is interested in spaces which are crafted for animals, as well as the wider animal sanctuary movement. So her talk today is going to explore the more than human worlds of farms and farm animal sanctuaries. And so I can already tell we're going to have another very interesting intersection between disciplines as we look at spaces as well as the more than human animals' lives. So Madelena, are you here? Lovely. Okay, so I'll pass it over to you to share your screen.
Thank you. So I'll just double check. Can everyone see that?
That looks perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. As said, my name is Madelena Mañetto, and I am a PhD candidate at the Victoria University of Wellington School of Design Innovation in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And today I'll be talking about the more than human worlds of farms and farm animal sanctuaries. So first of all, I'll be positioning myself as a researcher and talking briefly about my research interest, and then I'll take you through the value of thinking with worlds and how that informed my creation of an interpretive framework to analyze the stories we tell about farmed animals. And then I will show you how I used that framework to analyze farmed animal memoirs. And then finally, I'll take you through the phase I'm currently working on, which is my speculative design work that acts as a response to my analysis of farm memoirs. So first of all, my research interest is in understanding the spaces we share with farmed animals. And this really began during my master's research, where I spent time on a pig farm and explored the ways one farmer told stories about his pigs through social media. And then I kind of developed new narratives about pigs. Since that project, my research has expanded to include animal rights activism and advocacy. So now my focus is also on farm animal sanctuaries, which are spaces where formerly farmed animals are housed and taken under the sanctuary's care. So my background research, especially as a design researcher, really centers on the value of thinking with worlds, because that invites us to think not just with entities, but with relations. This includes relations within worlds, but also relations across worlds and the plurality of worlds that humans and other than human beings inhabit. It also brings up all kinds of questions about whose world counts or who counts in the world. Where do different worlds rub up against each other, and what kinds of frictions arise between these different worlds? Specifically, I'm interested in the frictions between farm worlds and sanctuary worlds. So the next part of my research, I focused on some of the primary concerns that arise in public responses towards farms and sanctuaries and the academic literature around that. So the three kind of main concerns around farming are concern for farmed animal welfare, concern for the environmental degradation as an impact of farming, and then the impacts on human health. And for sanctuaries, some of the concerns arise because of the notion that the animals are only as free as possible. So they sit within a kind of captive freedom where they're still kept within fences, medical regimes, and human routines. The utopian ideals of sanctuaries in aiming for a kind of ideal world and their intent versus their impact being quite significant, because sanctuaries still represent a kind of fringe example of one of the ways we live with farmed animals. And then the criticism around the whiteness of the vegan movement and questions around who is left out of the process and marginalized in building a world free from the oppression of farmed animals. Another key component of my research is staying with the trouble. So I've made a commitment to staying with the trouble and aligning with neither side of polarized debates around farm worlds and sanctuary worlds. So I sit within the gray in these discussions rather than the black or the white. And this means that in my research, I'm sort of navigating the messiness inherent within that rather than siding with a purity of belief. Donna Haraway wrote about staying with the trouble in 2016. And what she said was that staying with the trouble does not require a relationship to times called the present. In fact, staying with the trouble requires learning to be truly present, not as a vanishing pivot between awful or Edenic pasts and apocalyptic or salvific futures, but as mortal critters entwined in myriad unfinished configurations of places, times, matters, and meanings. So out of all of this background research, I created an interpretive framework to analyze the narratives told about farm worlds and sanctuary worlds in terms of how much they center more than human worlds in order to address some of those concerns I spoke about previously. And I also used this framework to pinpoint the similarities and differences between farm worlds and sanctuary worlds, and used it to also ultimately explore new ways of living well with other animals. So this is my framework that I've used across my entire research project. So I looked at the narrative elements of these stories, which were the characters, the settings, the relationships, and the morals and values of the stories. And then I analyzed them through the lenses of landscape, kinship, and care. I positioned landscape like that as an attempt to undo human representations of landscape as social product. So I look at the ways land features as a foregrounded character in the story rather than as backdrop, and whether or not harms and reparations are reckoned with. I also looked at how kinship was represented and whether non-human animals were presented as kinfolk through stories of closeness to them, whether there was space for restorative and reciprocal kinship in the stories, and whether they ultimately challenged power hierarchies. And then I also looked at care in the stories, so whether or not the characters, human and other than human, were presented as worthy in receiving of care, how there were stories of different ways of caring for non-human animals within a cycle of life and death, and then ultimately that these stories of careful multi-species assemblages promise restorative justice. So now just to show you how that that framework was actually applied, I'll show you how I used it to analyze farmed animal memoirs. So I initially read farm sanctuary memoirs due to a gap in academic literature about the sanctuary movement and the embodied values and practices of actually running a sanctuary. So I read 8 memoirs written by farm animal sanctuary owners. And then I also read 10 memoirs written by farmers. So I'll take you through some of the themes that emerged when analyzing the memoirs through my framework. So farmers and sanctuary owners wrote about a kind of rural idyll as the setting for their stories, and they constructed the landscape in terms of its simplicity, innocence, and virtuosity as part of a pastoral myth of a lost Eden divorced from the harsh realities of rural life and masking exploitation and oppression. They presented a bucolic landscape as the setting for the worlds that was aesthetically beautiful and removed from other types of worlds. They wrote about environmental degradation, especially in farm memoirs, where the effects of climate change were impacting the balance of the seasons and therefore impacting production. They also presented their responsibility as farmers in terms of environmental reparations and their awareness of the impact of livestock agriculture. The sanctuary owners presented the environment quite differently in terms of their overall message was the urging for readers to go vegan as one way of mitigating environmental damage. Kinship was told through either mass animality or individual animality. So farmers relate to their animals in groups of species, and their relationships with them were framed in terms of welfare. Sanctuary owners focused much more on the individuality of the animals. Each animal in the story was named, and they were often associated with a short anecdote about the sanctuary resident. The kinship with non-human animals was much stronger than kind of writing about the setting as part of this assemblage of kin. Family, friendship, and love was another way these memoirists told stories about the non-human animals. So sanctuary owners presented their worlds as a site for an interspecies family with opportunities for love and friendship between members of this community. Again, farmers related to most of their animals through welfare rather than friendship, but there were some exceptions, especially with working dogs on the farm and the sick animals who they brought in to their homes. Power hierarchies and human-animal relations were both challenged and affirmed in stories about current socio-political conditions for farmed animals, so still very wrapped up in a lot of those concerns I talked about at the beginning. Finally, care was presented through the hard daily labor necessary to run a farm or a sanctuary. So both farmers and sanctuary owners expressed concerns around finances, illnesses, medical treatment, physical labor, and public opinion, and also living and working within a rural landscape separate from a kind of urban way of life presented unique issues that they wrote about from a first-person perspective, such as navigating weather and isolation. Finally, both farmers and sanctuary owners wrote about the death of farmed animals and the political and ethical implications for them. Both of them wrote about what kinds of death were preferable, with sanctuary owners practicing euthanasia on their sanctuaries. And there was one sanctuary owner who elected to forego euthanasia altogether and let the animal sort of life run its course. Overall, there were limitations in how close these stories could get to restorative justice for more than human worlds. But what they did do for my design research was open up space to explore how to live and die well with other animals within careful multi-species assemblages. So the way I explored this space was through my speculative design practice. So I'm going to take you through some of the thinking and the iterations that I've been working through. Speculative design is a creative design practice and methodology that is used to ask what-if questions about how things could be different. So it's not tied to reality too much. You can create kind of implausible and radical futures and design what they might look like. It's also used to explore and communicate different ways of telling stories, in my case, about our relations with farmed animals. It thrives on imagination and aims to open up new perspectives on what are sometimes called wicked problems, to create spaces for discussion and debate about alternative ways of being, and to inspire and encourage people's imaginations to flow freely. So first of all, one of the first creative exercises I did was to write a bunch of prompts that I then wrote stories as responses to. And the whole idea of this was to create a kind of multi-worlding narrative where I was adopting the perspectives of different worlds. So I tried to write from the perspectives of animals within sanctuaries and farms. I tried to write from the perspectives of farmers, of sanctuary owners, and writing about different kind of futures and pasts in terms of the ways we live with farmed animals. So this was really the beginning of the creative design journey. I then designed an imaginary sanctuary journal where I adopted the perspective of a sanctuary owner and wrote about what it would be like to experience the collapse of livestock agriculture in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and all of the grief that would follow. One of the reasons I didn't finish this was because it not only didn't meet my framework fully in that I wasn't prioritizing more than human worlds enough. I was still writing from a singular kind of first-person perspective. But also my task was to imagine what would happen afterwards, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't imagine a kind of ideal world, and I know that's sort of the end goal of sanctuary work, but it just didn't kind of align with my ethics as a researcher and the research I had done previously. So what I'm currently working on and the kind of design that I've landed with is an imaginary co-design workshop. And I'm imagining that it is a workshop that spans lifetimes. So oftentimes co-design is done with a team of people. You get people together to kind of collaborate and design something. But in this case, I'm kind of bending the rules of co-design and making it something that lasts lifetimes. And it gathers human and non-human animals together on the land and asks them to collaboratively create their world. So it's an imaginary platform where participants are provided with a handbook containing the rules and guidelines, prompt cards for the participants, and they're given kind of 400 acres of land with assorted shelters on them. Again, this is a thought experiment, so I'm not actually going to do this. There are 3 groups of participants: human participants, animal participants, and land participants. And the whole idea is that each group have their own prompt cards. They get to decide what they want to do in the world. And this is my kind of attempt at equalizing the participants so that it's less anthropocentric. So just to briefly take you through some of the cards, I'm still in the process of visualizing and refining these cards, but just to give you a sense of what the human, animals, and land would be prompted to do. The humans are in red, animals in yellow, and land in green. In this one, they're asked to acquaint themselves with their surroundings, and then they're supposed to ask questions around how they're going to relate to each other on this land. What will they ask of each other? How will they seek to kind of repair any damage done or any harms created towards the other participants? For this prompt card, it's actually asking the humans, first of all, whether they want to build fences or not. So kind of creating that notion, this is neither a farm nor a sanctuary, you're creating something new. And then if they do erect the fences, the animals are prompted to break them, and the land is prompted to tempt the animals to do that. A third example is this one, which is a lot more sort of gentle than the last one. This one is really centered on the human, animal, and land participants grounding themselves. So relying on each other, choosing a companion to sit with, to breathe with, to settle in with. And the whole idea is that I'm trying to create an imaginary platform that creates a careful multi-species assemblage and a world where there is something different from farming and from sanctuary. I'd just like to finish with a quote by Ursula K. Le Guin, whose writing has informed every phase of my research, especially this final phase. And she said that to make a new world, you start with an old one, certainly. To find a world, maybe you have to have lost one. Maybe you have to be lost. The dance of renewal, the dance that made the world, was always danced here at the edge of things, on the brink, on the foggy coast. Thank you.
Madelena, thank you so much. That was another very, very rich presentation. And in true AIP fashion, we already have lots of questions coming in for you in the Padlet. So do take a look. We will come back to your questions after the last presenter. But yeah, thank you. I'm slightly speechless. You've managed to cover so much in such depth with creativity and innovation. It is really impressive work. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you. Okay, so our last presenter of this session then is Shanmugapriya. I really apologize if I have not done your name justice. So she's from the Vellore Institute of Technology. She holds a master's degree in English literature, and she now works as a research associate in the Department of English, Social Sciences and Language, where she studies human-animal interactions. So today her talk is going to focus on human-animal interactions within classic fables. I'm really looking forward to this one. So I'm going to hand you over. Perfect. We can see your screen. Are you able to make it full screen? If not, then that's absolutely fine as it is. Yeah, perfect. That looks great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for giving this wonderful opportunity, first of all. And I'm Shanmugapriya, internal full-time research scholar from India. My topic of presentation is human and non-human animals interactions in Indian classical fables. We, the group of human beings, have different food items, different habits, different shelter, and different lifestyle. But the only different thing is we humans can communicate and share our thoughts with one another through verbal language. But for non-humans, it's a big question. As of now, it is a actually it is not a question mark because there are certain research conducted based on animals and birds communication, and the scientific research shows that human can communicate like non-human can communicate like humans. For example, we all familiarly know that Coco the gorilla from America, in which the legendary gorilla can learn more than 1,000 words and comparably it's like exactly comparable to 3-year-old human child. So her last final plea to the human through the gesture was help her hurry. So my second slide is all about we human beings and nature have always been connected. The crucial roles of non-human having played in human existence is evidence from history. And these connections have a long debates in various academic fields and have allowed us to be a better understanding of human-animal relationship. Non-humans have been used in livestock transportation, hunting, harvesting, ornament purposes, food, zoo, and aquarium for profits, sports, and entertainment, as well as scientific study for the benefits of humans and military actions for certain academics. So, in similarly, in literature, writers also use non-humans to get their ideas across to the persons reading while with the help of literary device anthropomorphism. The anthropomorphism is derived from the Greek word anthropos, which means human, and morphe, the term which means shape. In the year 1753, this phrase was first used by a writer. Human-like anthropomorphism, humanoid, or the alternative term for anthropomorphism. It is actually a powerful tool in a literary device. It is an effective strategy for writers and great short stories and literature. In anthropomorphism, the character is not human, but it acts like human. So it can be found in a variety of stories, including folktales, fantasy, children's stories, and mythologies, as well as religious texts. A researcher Agarwal in the year 2017 states that anthropomorphism is a powerful tool. Animals like people are magnificent creatures of God. So it is an essential role in literature for children's, particularly young minds. Writers use this different kind of literary means and techniques to effectively express the thoughts and feelings to the book lovers, especially young peoples. Researcher Butterfield et al. In the year 2012 states that anthropomorphism is not only beneficial for the young mind, but it is also beneficial for the welfare of animal. So this is anthropomorphic representation of the first one is actually animal. Stories have only animal character with animals. And the second one is mostly animal with few human characters. And the third image is all about somewhat human and somewhat animal. And the last one is mostly human and with very less amount of human character. So author used this type of representations in short stories. The yearly story, Panchatantra and Jataka, is the research purpose of this story. This is actually, it is not just a fable for children, but it is also for adults. This is a rare collection because readers can find philosophy, politics, music, relationship, as well as human-animal relationship. These two classical fables have been translated and retold by multiple authors to the readers to give the moral and religious values. The wide reason and motivation for selecting these two classical fables are, it is so ancient with simple language, with a bundle of moral values, and still it is has been considered as a contemporary. This study analyzes the comparative aspect of anthrozoological aspects in Indian classical fables, Panchatantra and Jataka. Panchatantra tale was originally written in Sanskrit language, but later it has been translated into several languages. Researcher Rani in the year 2017 states that Panchatantra has been the second most translated book after the Bible. The main purpose of the short fiction is to teach a skill towards life to the readers. It is actually referred as a time machine because it informs us about our history and forewarns us about our future. This serves as a guide for us in the present. On the other hand, this Jataka tales, it is another significant addition to the early Buddhist literature, with stories that have been integrated into a variety of cultures. In addition, there was an overflowing of philosophical literature. This story is a part of semi-canonical Buddhist work, and that is a collection of all about 550 Jataka stories. Because these two books contain a number of morals, lessons, and all. So that's why it has been translated by different authors in different countries. This is a review of literature to find a research gap. The Panchatantra tales have been discussed in the form of environmental conscious by researcher Bhattacharya in the year 2017, post-colonial aspects by researcher Sharma, and social aspect by feminist aspect, and later it has been a translated aspect, postmodern aspects, and all. But on the other hand, Jataka tales have been discussed in the form of ecological aspects and character analysis aspects and so on. But there is no research has been made comes under human and animal interactions. So that will be considered as the research gap for this research. These two stories. The collection of Jataka tales is actually, I mentioned it is a 550 stories, but most of the stories are not in a written format. So the chosen book I have for the translation study for this research purpose is only contain 114 stories. This total 114 stories, 72 stories comes under anthropomorphized stories, and 42 stories were contained both only about human character stories. Out of these 72 anthropomorphized stories, human characters talk between or interaction between only human characters are 26 short stories. And the interaction between human and animal stories are available about 46 short stories. In that 46 short stories, there are both positive attachments as well as negative attachment stories. Positive attachment in the sense human beings, how positively or treating non-humans, like helping the non-humans or giving food and treating them in a positive way. That is comes under positive attachment stories. And the negative stories in the sense we humans treat animals in a negative way, like beating or killing them or abandon them somewhere and like that. But these Jataka stories and both Panchatantra have domestic as well as wild animals. On the other hand, in Panchatantra tales, it is a collection of 84 stories. Out of 84 stories, 62 stories comes under anthropomorphized stories, and 22 short stories comes under human stories. Out of 62 short stories, only human characters stories are 36 in total, and both human and non-human animals, birds are about 26 stories. Say in the same way, like Jataka, there is only 10 positive bond between human and animal stories, and 16 short stories is all about negative attachment. So In the conclusion slide, both the writers like Panchatantra, Vishnu Sharma, and Jataka by collection of Buddhist monks have given a positive as well as negative way of representation of human and animal bonds in this particular short stories. So nowadays, we humans visit animals at only zoo maximum. We visit animals in zoo, park, and natural documentaries. Non-humans may not be respond to our questions through verbally, but they do have feelings, emotions, and love just like us humans. I hope nowadays people have more awareness about animal law, rights, and health care, and so on. So this could be help us to treat the animals, non-humans like better and treat them better. So all the creatures in this earth created by God deserve all of the life free from fear and pain. This quote was stated by Cummings. So I concluded that to love, support, and adapt, and be the voice of voiceless. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. And what a lovely message to leave your presentation on. We've come back a few times throughout the conference to this idea of how does our research and our work advocate for more than human animals. So it's really lovely to see that message integrated into your conclusion. So thank you so much. So we are going to move to questions.